Hello and welcome to another session for Composition 2, Section 3004. If you're here with me, Mr. Fowler, it's either Tuesday or Thursday when you decide to watch this. Now, I hope that you enjoyed your Tuesday off, but we do have a couple of things that I want to discuss this week. So if you get a chance to watch this on Tuesday or, that's wonderful. Otherwise, this should be uploaded for Thursday's session. Now, let's go ahead and begin with today's, got a little focus issue here. Let's go ahead and begin with today's discussion. Okay, I'm going to use my share screen option, and I'm going to go up here to our home page. Oh, and here I am once again in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the announcements link. And for session 7 today, I'll make this a little bit larger if I can. I want to talk about the ad analysis rubric, touch base on that again, because it's been a while since we've actually looked at that document. I also want to review some principles behind how to decode visual arguments. After that, we'll perform another visual analysis. This time, we will focus on the multimedia ad analysis. And I'll use the Princess Bride's trailer, or I should say the film adaptation of the Princess Bride's trailer or movie preview, as a way to sort of conduct an example of a multimedia ad presentation. Then we will close today's sessions with some thoughts and reflective ideas. Now, because of this sort of strange schedule for this week, if you feel that you need some additional time to reference an idea with me or run a question by Mr. Fowler in real time, we can obviously set up some virtual office hours where we can conference about your individual assignments. A lot of you did an excellent job this past week during your discussion thread. And specifically, you all did a very good job, I think, of identifying things that were of concern to you as we headed into this week's discussion. So I thought that a little bit of praise was certainly due for you. Let's go ahead and click back to the course homepage for just a minute. So as part of our review for this week, if you remember last time from session 6, we talked about how to use your text to respond to visual arguments. And some of the ideas that we came across were informed by this document. So I'm going to switch my share screen to the original outline that we used last week. Okay, hopefully you should be seeing this and hearing me just fine. So we broke the discussion questions from our textbook, Practical Argument, the 3rd edition, into 3 sections. Number 1, of course, was our introduction, where we tried to identify a key thesis. Number 2, we tried to structure several body paragraphs by asking specific questions about the ad in context. This included a moment to pause during the body of the argument to allow for a refutation, meaning we should pause long enough to consider the other side or the other perspective of a given argument. That does 3 things for us. Number 1, it shows to our audience that we have considered the argument in more detail. Number 2, it allows us to counteract points from the other perspective, even though, and perhaps especially if, the other perspective has some relevant points. And lastly, it invests ourselves, or invests at least in our audience, a sense of ethos that they can believe in us as an authoritative speaker on the topic who has a well-rounded approach to their particular argument. Lastly, we also took a look at some concluding points that should be addressed before we close the argument. Unlike the opening or introduction, which leads to our thesis and starts with very broad information narrowing to a specific point, the conclusion does the inverse. It reminds the audience of what our specific point is and leads outward to a more fundamental or open sort of suggestion where we ask our audience to adopt our perspective or take some specific type of action. These are really basic moves that you've probably all remember from 103, but in case you didn't have me for 103 or you perhaps just wanted a refresher, we took a look at how to structure an essay in that fashion using a print advertisement. So today we'll have to go through and modify some of these questions so that they're better addressed for a multimedia ad or presentation. If any of the moves that I discussed during that review sounded familiar, that's because they should. If you think back to Practical Argument, Chapter 2, we learned about the 4 foundations of a solid argument, which are, again, an introduction or thesis, a body where we lay out our specific arguments, a refutation, and a conclusion. Those are called the 4 pillars of argument by our textbook, Practical Argument. So that's a reference or a link back to former knowledge that we had discussed earlier in the semester. Okay, this is where I would normally pause for questions if we were conferencing face-to-face, but since this is just a video, I'm going to pause for just a second here. Lean out a picture here to get a drink. Sorry, oops, let that focus return. Maybe. There it goes. Sometimes I have to use that thumb trick to get my focus to return. Okay. Let's move ahead now to the ad in question. This is going to require a few minutes of runtime. And you may at this point also want just to pause the video and go back and watch the trailer for yourselves. That way, if there is a problem with the buffering, because we're watching something at a higher resolution plus the video for this topic on top of that, you may want to fast forward so that you can go past the link. Just a pre-warning in case that occurs. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to take us back to our homepage. As we know, it's loaded here into the Content tab. Looks like I've got a couple of discussion posts that I didn't see also. Interesting. So I'm going to go here to the rhetorical or ad analysis. Don't feel nervous or upset about the fact that it might read as just ad or rhetorical analysis. It is the ad analysis. So here it is, the theatrical preview for The Princess Bride. I'm going to open that link. And we'll watch it together as soon as it loads. It's just a 30-second ad, but there's still going to be a lot to decode in that space. Make this a little bit larger. Here we go. Sorry, it was muted. So the first couple of minutes of the trailer showcases the setup, the frame device, which we've talked so much about. Now, you see Peter Falk and you see the young Fred Savage, who at the time was starring in a series on television called The Wonder Years. So you have this sort of synergy of Peter Falk from television as Columbo, and some people even still call him Kevin Arnold, the character name, but Fred Savage as potentially Kevin Arnold in this odd melding of two contemporary television actors into a film space. And then we get the frame reference of the book as the device that leads us into the rest of the trailer. We cut very quickly to a country scene in Florin, and then we cut to the bishop, who is one of the most memorable and comedic characters in the entire film. And I'll let it go on from here. We get a shot of Buttercup and Humperdinck. Then we get a shot of the Miracle Max because of Billy Crystal. Then we go backwards so that we get a chance to meet Wesley and Buttercup before the events unfold. Then we cut back to the child. And then we get our first pick of Fezzik. We get a scene of Inigo, the other two main protagonists. We get a shot of Wesley as the man in black, a very comedic exit to Zavini. Some very quick cuts of life in the castle. And then we're back to Miracle Max. So creating a framework as a logical through line, if you were watching this trailer for the first time, is almost impossible, as they jump around, not only through the film itself, but they reinsert elements from the framing device and multiple different components. Now, this does allow the film to play up some very energetic moments from the film itself, but in terms of delivering a clear and concise idea about the film and what it represents, I think you could easily argue that could be pulled off, so to speak, in a slightly better way. I'm just going to quickly share a screen to make sure that none of the sound interferes with what else we have to discuss for today. So let me get back to, get Grammarly. No, we don't need Grammarly. We have Mr. Fowler for that. All right, so I'm going to pause that, and I'm going to minimize this. Oops, no, that's not what I wanted to click on. Exit full screen. There we go. So I'm going to exit out of here, and then we're back to our screen, our class screen, which is what I wanted. All right. So hopefully this brief video analysis will give you a preview or give you some suggested ideas about how to start analyzing a multimedia ad. So let's go ahead and now see what we can do in terms of structuring an actual outline along those same lines. You may, again, want to pause the video a couple of times and go back to watch the original trailer as I reference certain topics within the structure of the outline. I've seen the trailer multiple times, so it's not going to be necessary for me to do that. But just so you can keep up, or if you have a question about what I'm trying to discuss while I'm in the process of discussing it, you just have a little forewarning. And to be forewarned is to be forearmed, as they say. Okay, so let me share once again this document. You're probably getting sick of seeing this outline at this point, but this should be the last time that we have to look at it together as a class. And it would help if I could click on the correct share screen. There we go. This is where I wanted to be. All right, so here we are again, facing the same set of questions that we looked at for the print ad analysis. In what source does the visual appear? Well, you could answer this in a variety of different ways, but Mr. Fowler is going to say that the source in question appeared as part of a theatrical trailer or preview of the film. Real quick bit of film history here. Why are they called trailers instead of previews? Well, they are previews, but they're called trailers because oftentimes they would be assembled on set as part of what's referred to as the dailies, or basically evidence of progress that occurred on the set as the film was being made. These dailies or trailers could then be quickly edited and sent back to the officials in the movie industry so that they could approve or change things on the fly based on what was going on in terms of what they saw on the visual reels, the dailies. So they're called trailers because they were cut in an actual physical trailer and then shipped back to the studio heads. Old time Hollywood reference, but if I'm going to keep calling it a trailer, it's nice to have some background information about why I'm referring to it in that respect. You can refer to it as a preview, whichever you prefer, as long as you're consistent with your ad analysis. So the source in question appeared as part of a theatrical trailer or preview of the film. For what kind of audience was it created? The trailer in question was created for a broad audience. Hopefully, or let's say, and one that was hopefully willing to invest time and money for the purposes of entertainment. More specifically, the film was intended for an audience. This harkens back to last week's ad analysis of, let's just say, of an audience aged 13 and older. Because even here in the theatrical trailer, it does suggest that it's a PG-13 rated film. So, to go from extremely broad to very specific, we should highlight the fact that there was an intended audience for the trailer and for the film itself. For what purpose was the visual created? Again, this is easy, repeated fodder that we can borrow from our initial discussion last week. The purpose of the trailer was to announce to theatrical audiences. Remember that they didn't have YouTube or other streaming media to use to promote films back when this was released. So it was for theatrical audiences at this point. The purpose of the trailer was to announce to theatrical audiences that the film would be released during the fall of 1987. Oops, 87. There we go. Who or what organization created the visual, and how do you know about the goals of the person or organization? So we can change this a little bit, because instead of Act 3 communications, which was the limited information available in the print ad for the poster, right away we see the familiar Fox 20th Century Studios logo displayed before we even get any kind of a look at the rest of the film. The film is clearly marketed by 20th Century. And here you can, again, just as a reminder, when you're writing an MLA, they tend to suggest that any number below 100 be written out. So I'm going to go ahead and write out 20th Century Fox, even though the go-to or probably instinctual move would be to write 20th. I'm going to go ahead and type out the title. Plus, it gets us closer to our word count that way. Okay, so the film is clearly marketed by 20th Century Fox Film Studios. Beyond that, beyond this initial description, Act 3, 3, communications, a collaboration between director Rob Reiner and his mentor. Oh shoot, I forgot what his name was real quick, but we'll just say his mentor for right now. Are also featured as a creative source of the film being advertised. Okay, moving on. What issue is the visual addressing? The only issue addressed by this trailer is the ad itself. Well, let's revise that. It's a little bit vague. Is the R, we'll say trailer R, the merits of the film being advertised? Namely, The Princess Bride is described as a rollicking adventure that will keep audiences of all ages entertained and delighted. Okay. Basically, the thesis is the next sentence. The creators of the trailer hope that audiences will be intrigued by the new film, well, new for 1987, and elect to spend their money to watch it. That's our thesis. So I'm going to highlight that as the focus of this introduction. So now we've taken a very broad approach to the idea of what the trailer is offering, and we've narrowed it down to a specific point that we can argue for. Let's scroll down a little bit further. Now, we're interested in the body of the essay. What position does the visual take on the issue, and how can you tell? The ad uses various quick cuts that establish the film as a fictional fairy tale experience. As described by a grandfather reading a book to his grandson. The creators of the trailer bank on the notoriety. Nope, Mr. Fowler, that's not right. Notoriety. That's not right either. So there, we got it. So bank on the notoriety of the two initial stars or slash actors introduced. Specifically, they begin to orient their audience to the scene, to the familial scene using young actor Fred Savage and established performer Peter Falk. At the time, both actors were relatively well known for their television work. Fred Savage was just beginning a stint on the series The Wonder Years, while Falk was concluding his work on the series Columbo. So we have a couple of different ideas here that we've introduced in the beginning. The scene, and look at this, I'm already breaking into another body paragraph here. The scene then transitions to showcase elements from the film, which include an establishing shot of the city of Florin, the fictional city of Florin. This will help orient our audience to more details about the trailer or the ad that we're analyzing. Okay. The next scene showcases a humorous character, the Archbishop, using his famous line, marriage. Whoop. Let's undo that. Let's undo that. Okay. Well, I can't get that back apparently, so I'll have to. Anyway, I'll have to quickly rewrite that. So from this point on, we can answer some of the other questions described in the context of the paper. Do you agree with the position? Generally speaking, I would say that I do feel that the audience would be willing to invest both time and money into the purchase of tickets, of a ticket to a theatrical showing of the film The Princess Bride. Okay. I've misspelled theatrical. Okay, there we go. So we can see that this version is a little bit different from our initial ad print analysis because it does not ask us to agree with a specific position beyond that of whether or not we find the ad compelling. Okay. Let's see here. Does the visual include words? Here we have a very specific way to answer. The visual in question certainly does include words. The title of the film, as well as the names of the companies presenting the trailer, all appear clearly on the screen. In addition, near the end of the trailer, which is about 30 seconds in length. It's a quick one. Information about the film's rating and its stars and release date are all prominently featured. Beyond these written examples, the trailer also includes specific audio cues from the performers in the film along with a narrative overlay. What points do they make? This one's a little bit, again, specific. The point being pressed by the trailer is that trailer, having a brain bubble here, trailer is that The Princess Bride is a worthwhile film that will entertain, the most critical of viewers. Okay, that's the point of the trailer, essentially. You want to get the audience interested and invested in seeing more, discovering what the entirety of the trailer is trying to represent, so that they'll invest time and money in seeing the film once it comes into theaters. That's the point of a lot of ads, be they print or multimedia campaigns. What point or points do they make? Okay, we've kind of already determined that. What does the visual need more or different written text? The visual text utilized for this trailer is sufficient. As multimedia, sound and visuals convey meaning more directly than a written analysis would. And yeah, I mean, I just typed that out and spoke it in a class that's dedicated to writing. I don't feel it's wrong to admit that in certain instances, audio and visual content can more directly address a need or concern for a specific audience. That's probably proven to be true if you just look at the state of the publishing industry versus the state of the film industry. Although right now, due to COVID, there might be a slight inversion, but generally speaking, we absorb more multimedia than we do traditional media or print media, at least in the US. And I would guess probably globally that tends to be true also. Okay. Back to our outline. All right. Does the visual seem to be a refutation? Again, our answer changes because of the variety of things that we're writing about. The visual trailer does not appear to refute anything. In fact, the purpose of the entire enterprise seems to be focused on getting audiences to agree that the film is interesting, is worthy of attention. Let's say that. Conclusion: is the visual effective, attractive, interesting, clear, or convincing? This is something I would leave up to you, but for Mr. Fowler's perspective and for the sake of kind of designing a conclusion, I could say that ultimately, while the trailer is a bit confusing, it does a good job in using the constituent elements to present a reasonable expectation for excitement and interest. So that takes us to about 623 words. So in the time that we spent just, again, analyzing these elements and assembling a kind of an outline, we have achieved the appropriate length for this particular assignment. So you could take those questions and when added in a reflective way to the text that we composed for this visual multimedia argument, again, you'd have a pretty substantive bit of writing that you could turn into a very effective argumentative paper, or in this case, ad analysis. So in review, let's pause to consider a couple of things. Number one, visual multimedia print analysis. Let me restate that. Visual multimedia analysis is quite similar to the way that you would prepare a print analysis of a similar project. You would probably focus on, again, moving from very broad information to very specific information in the introduction, ending with a thesis statement. Then you would build your body using the essay, using the most important arguments or pieces of evidence that you could bring to bear to help your audience understand why you feel this analysis is effective or ineffective. You may need to pause for a refutation in this analysis, or at least to refute what could have been made better. So for example, in this analysis, we could have said that introducing the characters from the fictive components of the story, as opposed to beginning with a framing device, would have created less confusion and provided more clarity as to the nature of the film itself and what's at stake for the characters in it. That is debatable. And then, of course, you would move into a conclusion where you sort of started with a specific point and broadened your discussion out to summarize your key ideas, and then called your audience to perform some sort of action, or at least to adopt or consider your perspective. So those, again, are the 4 pillars. They are thesis, evidence, refutation, conclusion. And they undercut or underscore, I shouldn't say undercut, they underscore the development of an effective discussion, whether that be of a print analysis, as we saw last week, or in today's session, a multimedia analysis. So now you've got 2 examples using the sort of questions that I assembled into a rough outline. And where do those questions come from? Again, your text, Practical Argument, 3rd edition. I think that if you applied the same process to a multimedia ad as I did to this one, you'd have similar effective results. And if you needed to expand or contract, you could toss out or avoid specific questions that were focused on print media rather, and or adapt or apply those effectively to a multimedia ad such as this trailer. Okay, I hope this was effective for you today. Just 1 session this week, kind of limited. So if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me via email. We can even set up a virtual one-to-one conference so that you can have your questions answered before we get ready for next week. Now, next week, we will have writing labs. So again, I will be available mostly in a remote capacity in case you stumble across something you couldn't have anticipated or encounter unforeseen difficulty. I'll be there to help you through that. Also, last reminder for today, if you have not yet ordered a physical copy or a copy of The Princess Bride that you can listen to or read, you may want to do that after September 15th, which is coming up at the end of next week. We'll be getting into the text of The Princess Bride specifically. So you may want to be prepared for that transitional discussion point in ready time. Okay, that's it for Mr. Fowler today. Thanks so much for your time and your attention, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.